Hey folks, good morning. Happy Tuesday. I hope you guys are all doing well. Today for advisory, I want to talk about just one word, and that is resilience. Specifically, we're going to talk about resilience in the way that we can be resilient in how that we approach things that are tough. Resilience is the capacity to withstand or to recover quickly from difficulties or toughness. And that's the main definition that we're going to be working with and thinking about. But I think the second definition is very interesting too in thinking about what resilience means, because it says it is the ability of a substance or an object to spring back into shape, like elasticity. And some synonyms are flexibility, pliability, suppleness, plasticity, elasticity, springiness. Like the resilience of this rubber band means that whenever I stretch it, it will, whenever I let go, snap back into place. So that's resilience, ability to withstand or recover quickly from difficult things or from strain or stress. And in our life, resilience says that even though bad things may happen, we can still get through them. And don't just take my word for it. There is a lot of research out there when it comes to how people can be resilient and what it takes to be a resilient person. And this person, Dr. Lucy Hone, has 3 secrets for us of resilient people. She's got a longer TED Talk that we're going to watch a few excerpts from, but I'm going to let her introduce herself and the subject, and then I'm going to, just for time's sake, come on and talk about the 3 secrets that she goes through. But if you get the chance, I highly suggest that you look up the rest of this TED Talk and watch the whole thing. So without further ado, here is Dr. Lucy Hone with the 3 secrets of resilient people.
So I'd like to start, if I may, by asking you some questions. If you've ever lost someone you truly love, ever had your heart broken, ever struggled through an acrimonious divorce, or been the victim of infidelity, please stand up. If standing up isn't accessible to you, you can put your hand up. Please stay standing and keep your hand up there. If you've ever lived through a natural disaster, been bullied or been made redundant, stand on up. If you've ever had a miscarriage, if you've ever had an abortion or struggled through infertility, please stand up. Finally, if you or anyone you love has had to cope with mental illness, dementia, some form of physical impairment, or cope with suicide, please stand up. Look around you. Adversity doesn't discriminate. If you are alive, you are going to have to, or you've already had to, deal with some tough times. Thank you, everyone. Take a seat. I started studying resilience research a decade ago at the University of Pennsylvania in Philadelphia. It was an amazing time to be there because the professors who trained me had just picked up the contract to train all 1.1 million American soldiers to be as mentally fit as they always have been physically fit. As you can imagine, you don't get a much more skeptical, discerning audience than the American drill sergeants returning from Afghanistan. So for someone like me, whose main quest in life is trying to work out how we take the best of scientific findings out of academia and bring them to people in their everyday lives, it was a pretty inspiring place to be. I finished my studies in America, and I returned home here to Christchurch to start my doctoral research. I'd just begun that study when the Christchurch earthquakes hit. So I put my research on hold, and I started working with my home community to help them through that terrible post-quake period. I work with all sorts of organizations, from government departments to building companies and all sorts of community groups, teaching them the ways of thinking and acting that we know boost resilience. I thought that was my calling, my moment to put all of that research to good use. But sadly, I was wrong. For my own true test came in 2014 on Queen's birthday weekend. We and 2 other families had decided to go down to Lake Ohau and bike the Alps to Ocean. At the last minute, my beautiful 12-year-old daughter, Abby, decided to hop in the car with her best friend, Ella, also 12, and Ella's mum, Sally, a dear, dear friend of mine. On the way down, as they travelled through Rakaia on Thompson's track, a car sped through a stop sign, crashing into them and killing all three of them instantly. In the blink of an eye, I find myself flung to the other side of the equation, waking up with a whole new identity. Instead of being the resilience expert, suddenly I'm the grieving mother, waking up not knowing who I am, trying to wrap my head around unthinkable news, my world smashed to smithereens. Suddenly I'm the one on the end of all this expert advice, and I can tell you, I didn't like what I heard one little bit. In the days after Abby died, we were told we were now prime candidates for family estrangement, that we were likely to get divorced and we were at high risk of mental illness. Wow, I remember thinking, thanks for that. I thought my life was already pretty Leaflets describe the 5 stages of grief: anger, bargaining, denial, depression, acceptance. Victim support arrived at our door and told us that we could expect to write off the next 5 years to grief. I know the leaflets and the resources meant well, but in all of that advice, they left us feeling like victims, totally overwhelmed by the journey ahead and powerless to exert any influence over our grieving whatsoever. I didn't need to be told how bad things were. Believe me, I already knew things were truly terrible. What I needed most was hope. I needed a journey through all that anguish, pain, and longing. Most of all, I wanted to be an active participant in my grief process. So I decided to turn my back on their advice and decided instead to conduct something of a self-experiment. I'd done the research, I had the tools. I wanted to know how useful they would be to me now in the face of such an enormous mountain to climb. Now, I have to confess at this point, I didn't really know that any of this was going to work. Parental bereavement is widely acknowledged as the hardest of losses to bear. But I can tell you now, 5 years on, what I already knew from the research, that you can rise up from adversity, that there are strategies that work, that it is utterly possible to make yourself think and act in certain ways that help you navigate tough times.
So there are 3 examples that she gives, and I'm going to talk about them a little bit quickly just for time's sake. So the 3 secrets of resilient people is that resilient people do these things. First of all, resilient people know that stuff happens. It's an acknowledgement that this life isn't perfect and that there are going to be some hard times. A lot of the times what we see on TV, on Instagram, on the things that we consume, we expect life to be more perfect than it actually is, or we expect to be entitled to a life that goes well. But that is almost never the case. If you remember, at the beginning of the video, she had the entire audience standing whenever she was going through different hardships that people could have possibly gone through. And by the end of her list, everyone was standing up. So resilient people know that life is hard and that things are going to happen. And just that knowledge that things are hard makes it easier to go through. Number 2 is resilient people carefully select where to put their attention. She talks about how resilient people accept the things that they can't change and focus on the things that they can. She talks about how negative emotions stick to us like Velcro, whereas positive things that happen to us often kind of bounce off. She talks about how natural this is. It's a natural evolutionary response to danger that our brains are constantly trying to get us out of threats. And that saves us a lot of the times, but sometimes when the threats are so many and they're from so many different directions, it can be easy to focus on those negative things. And so resilient people have found ways to focus on the good things that are in their life rather than the hardships that they're going through. And this is easier said than done, for sure. But if by focusing on things like gratitude and what is going well in your life, you can deal with the things that are going not so well because you know that there are other positive things happening as well. And the third thing she talks about is that resilient people consistently ask themselves, is what I'm doing helping or harming me? Remember, there's things that you can control, there's things that you can't control. And what you can control is what you do. And so, is the thing that I am doing helping me with this grief, with this hardship, or is it harming me further and making it more difficult down the line to deal with this hardship? Resilient people are constantly evaluating what they do and how they respond to bad things to make sure they don't harm themselves further. So, for instance, if you're going through a situation where you've just been broken up with, you've just been dumped by your boyfriend or girlfriend, it would probably help you move on better to maybe block them on Instagram, to not worry about what they're doing. It would probably harm you to sit there and look through old photos of both of you or look through their Instagram profile or whatever it is. So thinking about what you are doing to help or harm yourself in the moment is very important. So those are the main three things that she talks about. Like she says, there's a lot more research on how to be resilient in tough times. I'm going to let you guys have the discussion on the next slide, but first I'm going to let you see the end of her talk and let Dr. Hone have the last word. Be good to yourself and others, and I'll see you real soon.
3 strategies. Pretty simple. They're readily available to us all, anytime, anywhere. They don't require rocket science. Resilience isn't some fixed trait. It's not elusive that some people have and some people don't. It actually requires very ordinary processes, just the willingness to give them a go. I think we all have moments in life where our life path splits and the journey we thought we were going down takes some terrible, veers off to some terrible direction that we never anticipated and we certainly didn't want. It happened to me. It was awful beyond imagining. If you ever find yourselves in a situation where you think, there's no way I'm coming back from this, I urge you to lean into these strategies and think again. I won't pretend that thinking this way is easy, and it doesn't remove all the pain. But if I've learned anything over the last 5 years, it is that thinking this way really does help. More than anything, it has shown me that it is possible to live and grieve at the same time. And for that, I will be always grateful. Thank you. Thank you.